Hi, Chavi. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good too. Thank you. So, can you tell us something about yourself?
Yes. So I have completed my master's in biotechnology. Then I joined Vedanta, and there in that company they gave me training or testing, and that's how I upgraded my profile to manual tester. There I was conducting UAT testing, right from pay to procurement and to inventory management. And I used to write test cases based on different test scenarios. And then I raised the defect in HPLM and driving it to closure. Then after this, I got married and we moved to US for 4 to 5 years. There I had kid, and I was on dependent visa, so I was not able to work there. But I was working as a sorry, I had
No
cold.
problem. No problem. No problem. Take care.
So there I was working as a volunteer, as a coding teacher. So I used to teach Python and Java to
Mm-hmm.
students there, but I was working as a volunteer there, no pay. So when we came back to India, there it was COVID time, so I joined here full-time coding instructor job,
Mm-hmm.
work from home, and I
Fine. Yeah. So, you were telling that you were working as a trainer for Python
volunteer.
volunteer.
Yeah, as a volunteer in US. So when I came back to India, that time it was COVID time, year was 2020. And then I started the full-time job as a coding instructor.
Mm-hmm.
And I started teaching Python and Java same to school kids. And parallelly, I started training on automation testing. So then I started training on automation testing, both API and UI testing.
Mm-hmm.
And then for API testing, I created TestNG hybrid framework by using rest assured. And then for manual API testing also, I worked on Postman. And for automation, Java plus Selenium, for UI automation testing, I worked on Java plus Selenium, and there also I created TestNG hybrid framework. And I executed a parallel, I worked on parallel execution also by using Sauce Lab and Selenium Grid.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful, wonderful. That sounds great. So you have got exposure in different types of testing, UI as well
Yeah,
as API.
yes. So that is why I'm applying for job now. I'm looking for a great job.
Wonderful. Yeah. Okay. So, um, can you explain one real-time scenario where you did API testing, and because of the API testing, you were able to find out the issues in the application. So you were able to find out the issues and what kind of issues you got with the help of API testing.
So as I told you, I did training on API testing.
Mm-hmm.
So at that time, I was working on an application or GitHub.
Mm-hmm.
So there, first I went through the proper documentation of GitHub, and then there I just took one endpoint there for to create a repository in GitHub. So based on that endpoint, first I understood the endpoint properly, and then I created different scenario on that, like two positive scenario. First is to create a public repo with all positive inputs, and then to create a private repo with all positive inputs. But the moment I entered the means the input which is not valid, for example, the wrong organization name,
Mm-hmm.
or the payload, if there is something wrong in the payload or there is something wrong in the token, then definitely I
Mm-hmm.
got a defect there. And then based on the status code, and I just fixed the issue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. So, um, based on the wrong payment, the invalid, the positive and the negative scenarios you tested it with.
Yeah.
Okay. So, which were the assertions that you were using at the time of API testing?
API testing assertions means
Yes.
for
The
Postman or
checkpoints.
for API
Yeah.
automation?
For Postman, if you can. So you tested using Postman tool, right? Or did you use
Both,
both?
both. Yeah.
So yeah, first we can cover Postman.
Okay, so for Postman, I worked on chai.js assertion library.
Mm,
So the feature has introduced in Postman where we can write the JavaScript code snippets
mm,
in the test section where we can test the status code and the response body. Through status code and its response body, we can actually validate.
mhm.
So this is the assertion library that we have used to validate
Okay,
the
okay.
Postman.
Fine. And
Yeah.
for rest assured?
For rest assured, to validate the response, we use matches. Actually, for two, three methods were there, like for dot body, inline body validation for
Mm,
validation, and then matches, Hamcrest matches we used for
mhm.
validation.
Okay, fine. Now, you were mentioning about the token. So how
Yeah.
did you handle authentication in API testing when you are dealing with tokens or API keys?
Can you please repeat?
Yeah, so you were mentioning about the token which is coming when you're trying to authenticate in the API. So how did you deal with such kind of tokens?
Okay.
Hmm.
How do you deal? Okay, so
Hmm.
basically, I was using an application GitHub.
Hmm.
There I have created, I was using the basic auth there.
Hmm.
Sorry, the bearer token. I was
Bearer
using
token.
bearer
Okay.
token.
Hmm.
Just give me 1 second.
No problem, no problem. Take your time. Yeah.
Okay, so for GitHub, we have used bearer token.
Hmm.
And we have created two types of token there. One is for to create the repository in the GitHub, and
Hmm.
one is to delete the repository.
Hmm.
So yeah, we use these two token, and uh, means to deal means what? I didn't
So,
get it
so how
actually.
did you automated that token mechanism? Because every time whenever you are trying to hit the API, it would request for a new token would be getting generated. So you cannot store that particular token. So
But in GitHub we can actually uh save this for 3 months expiration. Like time period is fixed for
time
the
period is
token.
fixed.
Yeah,
Okay. All right.
yeah.
So
So for GitHub, it was 3 months expiration time. So
mhm.
after 3 months, you need to generate again. So I learned how to generate in GitHub. I know how to
Okay.
generate token in GitHub.
Okay. Okay. Fine. What is the difference between authentication and authorization?
So authentication is the basic access to the application,
Hmm.
and authorization means access to the specific areas of the application that is under scope.
Mhm. So which are the different status codes that you observed when you were doing API testing?
Okay,
Hmm.
so we got many different kinds of status code. Like for
Hmm.
201 is to create a repository, if I talk in case of GitHub, or to insert any record.
Hmm.
And for 204 means delete, for delete, to delete
Hmm.
something, to 204. And 401 is when we get 401 when we enter invalid repo token,
Hmm.
invalid token or expired token. And 403 is the token we entered is correct, but it is out of scope. Then 404 means there is something wrong in the URL. 400 means there is something wrong in the payload, JSON payload.
Hmm.
And all 500 series means some the server, something there is wrong with the server.
Server error.
And
Yeah.
and uh, and
Hmm. So see, these are the status codes. If let me
yeah,
show.
actually
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know the
Hmm.
entire list, but I remember the whatever I have
Yeah.
used.
No problem. No problem. So you can remember in this manner as well, like 2x series. So 200, 201, that is for successful.
Mhm.
Resource created successfully, request successful. Then you have 400 series. In
Mhm.
that you have bad request, invalid request. 401 is unauthorized. 404 is not found, resource not found.
Mhm.
Then you have 500 series, 5x. So in that you have internal server error. So these kind of status codes are a bit common. So you can answer these status codes in an interview as well.
Yeah.
Right? So
Okay.
that's good. Now, okay, when you say that you were doing API automation using REST Assure, was it integrated with CI/CD?
No. That time
Mm-hmm.
when I was doing training, no, it
Yeah.
was not integrated.
Okay.
But yeah, no,
Okay.
it was not
What is
integrated.
CI/CD?
Continuous integration and continuous development.
Mm-hmm. So why do we have to integrate this API thing with CI/CD?
So as far as I know, as per
Mm-hmm.
my understanding,
Mm-hmm.
um, means whenever the code is developed,
Mm-hmm.
it is transferred to a repository, and then it is the code from where the code where the code is stored. Then it is next for testing, and it will go for testing, and then the same process will continue.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I'm not very sure.
Okay.
Can you
See,
please?
yeah, sure, no problem. See, CI/CD would be essential when you have things that are being to be deployed at the continuous rate.
Yeah, deployed.
So, yeah, so you have the development team. They are working on some set of APIs, and they are not pretty sure what if they club all the APIs together and then together as a unit it would work or not. So
Hmm.
you can create a pipeline. You can
Okay.
integrate all the APIs that are being developed so far, and you can deploy them. Then you
Okay.
can run your API test, which you have created in the post when
Yeah.
you are telling collection. You can run those tests as well,
Hmm.
and you can see, okay, what is the outcome? What is the end result? Are
Hmm.
all the APIs running fine? You
Hmm.
might get some unit test issue. You might get some integration level issue that together
Hmm.
the APIs, there's an integration issue. So those kind of things can come up to the surface at a very quicker rate if you have integrated it with CI/CD itself,
Okay.
right? Those kind of
Okay.
things.
Okay.
Okay. Now let me give you one scenario. So imagine you have one payment. Is the screen visible to you?
Yeah.
Yeah, payment gateway API, which is not accessible in the test environment, right? So we have number of environments with us. One is test, one is let's say UAT, one is production. Various
Yeah.
environments are there. We are
Hmm.
doing testing in the test environment. This particular API would be
Hmm.
accessible in the production environment, but in
Okay.
test environment, it is not accessible.
Hmm.
But you have to provide the sign off based on testing you perform in test environment, right? So how would you deal with this situation? What would you do in this scenario?
Okay. Uh, I understood the question, but
Hmm.
just give me 1 minute because this is my time to
No problem.
my son is
No
coming
problem.
from school. Just now he rang the
Yeah,
bell.
no problem, no problem.
Okay.
Yeah, take your time.
Uh,
Yeah. So this was a scenario.
hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. So you are saying there's a payment gateway API which is not accessible in the test environment. A
Mm,
sign off based on the test environment.
mm.
Can you please explain me
Mhm.
in a little simpler way?
Yeah.
Hmm.
So see, generally what would happen is when you will do the API testing,
Hmm.
you will get the APIs of all the modules,
Okay.
and you would get the request and the response parameters as well.
Hmm.
But there are at times some APIs are having third-party integration,
Hmm.
which is possible in production environment that those third-party integration is done. But in test environment, you cannot leverage that third-party integration because it would have some cost associated with it,
Hmm.
right? So in this case, you have an API which you have to
Hmm.
perform the testing.
Hmm.
That is a kind of an integration testing you have to do
Hmm.
payment gateway. So you have to add the product to the cart and you have
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
perform the payment maybe by
Hmm.
via credit card, debit card, or via UPI. But
Hmm.
this API is not directly accessible in the test environment.
Hmm.
Hence, how would you execute your integration level of scenarios, right? Which is being covered here via API. What would you do in
Uh,
this scenario? Yeah.
so whatever I have learned based on
Mm-hmm.
this,
Yeah.
first I will deploy it to
Mm-hmm.
my environment.
Mm-hmm.
like test environment.
Okay, what will you deploy?
The API,
Okay, the
the
API,
build.
the build you got, let's say you got an email from the development team that this particular APIs you can now test it further. But
Mm,
there is a dependency in this API because it is not accessible in the test environment. You cannot
okay.
take the production environment API, right?
Mm,
Otherwise, it will be live. It is live,
okay.
right? So how would you do here? What would you do in this case? So do you want me to assist you out here?
Yeah, yeah.
Sure, sure. So see, you can come up with a concept of mock APIs.
Okay.
Right. What does
Okay.
mock API do?
Mm,
So it's let's say there are two kinds of interviews. One is real-time interview, one is mock interview.
mm,
Similarly, there are two kinds of APIs. One is real-time API,
okay.
one is the mock API. Mock APIs will have, you can get it done by the development team, and you can have those kind of APIs which will simulate the
Mm,
behavior like that of a real-time
I
API
got it.
only, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm,
In this language they also call this as call it as stubs or creating some drivers and then
mm,
testing on those simulated environments, right? And
mm.
you'll ask the development team to keep the behavior as is. Apart
Okay.
from that, you can also evaluate some open source APIs, and you can
Mm.
identify which
So,
APIs have got similar behavior to that of the production API,
okay.
right?
Okay.
And then you can work on those APIs,
So
and
then
at the
we
time
can
of sign
start
off,
testing
okay,
on
please
those
go ahead.
APIs.
Yes, and at
Mm,
the time of sign off, when you are giving sign off in, let's say, any of the test management tool or anywhere, you have
mm,
to mention in crystal clear words
mm,
that this particular API was not
mm,
accessible in test environment,
mm.
hence you took this
Okay.
different route,
Okay, I got it.
right? So it's a conditional sign off you would be giving,
Mm.
and you would be telling, you will be having a transparency with the client or with the product
Thank you for this
stakeholders.
information.
Yeah, yeah, no problem, no problem.
I got it.
Right?
Mm,
Okay. Now, let's say if you have to deal with a large volume of test data in the
mm,
API, so
mm.
how would you manage with that test data?
So if I have to manage with a large volume,
Large
then I will
volume.
use data-driven testing.
Okay. So can you
Mm,
elaborate? How would you do? Let's say you have a logins API with a username and password as the parameters.
mm,
How would you input 100 sets of credentials,
mm.
100 of username, 100 of password? How would you go with the data-driven approach?
So first I will start with the postman.
Mm,
So the first I will create all the different scenarios, positive and negative scenarios, by using CSV format.
mm,
And then I will go to my collection, and then in collection through runner page, I will select the CSV format,
mm,
and then I can run. I will execute this test. So with the help of CSV, actually, it when I will select the .csv format,
mm,
it will execute as many times as I want.
mm,
It will take the iterations, like for example, 100 rows are there, so it will take 100 iterations,
mm.
and we can execute like a large number of data.
Okay. What are the different challenges that you are facing while doing API testing?
So, like first, uh, same, like if we have so much of data,
Mm,
then putting the different parameter combination of parameters
mm,
and considering all parameters, and then we have to create a different positive and negative scenario. That is a big challenge. Then to construct a payload, JSON
mm,
payload
mm,
with different datas, if the data are too much, then also it is a challenge to create a payload.
mm, mm,
And then if the documentation is also not proper,
mm,
then it's a big challenge.
mm,
And while validating also, if there is too much parameters, then it is a challenge
mm.
while validating. And creating complex Pojo classes are also a big challenge.
So what is Pojo class?
Pojo class is plain old Java object, the full form of Pojo class. And Pojo class mainly in Pojo class mainly we have data members and getters and setters method.
Mm-hmm.
So we use Pojo class for the process of serialization and deserialization in API testing. Serialization means we use Pojo class to send the payload,
Mm-hmm.
and for deserialization, we use Pojo class to validate the response.
Mm-hmm. Right, right. Great. Fine. How would you test an API that is designed to, so you have to test the concurrency for that particular API. So how would you test that particular API? You have to test the
Concurrency
concurrency levels. Yeah,
means,
concurrency means parallel execution. So let's say
okay,
if you have to,
parallel
yeah,
execution
parallel. So
means
that
we have
API,
to run in different browser or operating system or what?
no, different users might be hitting that API at the one particular time at same go.
Uh,
So how would you test that particular API?
okay.
Mm.
Uh,
So concurrent testing. So if you perform concurrent testing, so you can take an example of any e-commerce website or even a banking application. So a lot of transactions are happening together.
hmm,
Or in an e-commerce website, a lot of orders are being processed, a lot of orders are being done.
hmm.
So how would you test such API?
Um, I think the process would be same, because if lot of transactions are there, that means a lot of things are going in database record.
Mhm.
So
So how would you do that testing? What would be your approach? You got an API, you got the request parameters, and you have to test it, the you can say the load testing, or you can say the concurrency level of that API. How much users can it withstand?
yeah, it's a kind of load testing.
Mhm.
Again, I will first analyze the endpoint thoroughly.
Mhm.
Then, on based on different parameters, as much as I can access, I will come up with different positive and negative scenarios.
Mhm.
And based on those positive and negative scenario, if I'll talk about the rest assured, if I'll use
Mhm.
the rest assured, then I will create a test ng class for one endpoint. And then by using different test ng methods, I will execute the test.
Okay. See, if you get this kind of a question,
Huh.
then basically you have to give the answer in a structured format. First is
Okay.
definitely the points that you mentioned are proper, but it becomes very important to choose the right words in an interview, right? So you
Yeah.
have to
Yeah.
speak the right words. So define the concurrency requirement. Now, what is the number of users that you're expecting them to support?
Mm,
You're expecting that API to support, right? Is it
mm,
100? Is it 200? Is it thousands? So
mm,
you'll identify the scenarios. Maybe what is the peak usage time? So if it's an e-commerce website and you observe that it's a festival offer, right? So
mm,
the the peak time might be during maybe after the offer is coming at 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. Whenever the offer is there for that particular 24 hours,
mm,
which is the transaction that is going to actually happen? What is
mm,
the functionality or the flow?
mm.
With how much concurrent users you have to do, so you can increase step by step, right?
Okay.
And then you will see the response time. What is the response time? So if let's say it should support, for example, 100 users.
Okay.
So you will see what is, and it is a kind of a transaction it has to do.
Mm,
Then what was the time taken by the first user API? Let's say it
mm.
took 5 seconds, and the 100th user API should also take somewhere around 5 seconds only.
Okay.
So if the API is able to withstand that load, then the time taken by that API would be the same as that of any number of users. Whether it's a concurrent load that you are applying, still it
Mm,
would be the same. If
mm,
So if it is happening like this, then the expected result is fine. But if it is happening like first user, it took 5 seconds. For 100 user, it
Okay.
took like 500 seconds.
Hmm.
There is a flaw in the API. There's a
Yeah.
problem with the API.
Hmm.
Okay. Now,
Hmm.
5 seconds, how would you come to know about this duration? So that also you would ask the business analyst or the project management team that what is the expected time that it should take.
Okay.
Now, let's say if they tell we don't know, then you can go into the production environment
Mhm.
and you can capture the time taken currently, right? And if you are going with the concurrent testing, then you will also identify what is the current time taken and
Hmm.
if there is a performance improvement in that API or it's a
Mhm.
performance decrease in that API.
Okay.
Those kind of things you have to test.
Okay. I got
For
it.
for one user, for one hit of an API, if it is taking 5 seconds, for all the 100 subsequent requests, also the timing should be the same. Right? Those kind of things you have to test in this scenario.
So, for example, if the time
Mm.
is different
Then
from
it's a bug.
first,
Yeah,
hmm?
then it's a bug.
Okay.
So here you are telling if the first API hit that you did, it
Hmm.
took 5 seconds.
Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
This the 100th API,
Hmm.
right? It so 100 at a time.
Hmm.
So maybe first 10 are taking 5 seconds, then last 10 are taking 500 or maybe 50 seconds,
Hmm.
right? So 500. So 500 is a problem.
Yeah.
That means it is not able to handle those kind of things. The system is being slowed down. And here there are various other parameters as well. The machine, the CPU utilization that you will see, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Those should be proper. It should not happen that
So,
there are
how would
multiple
we,
things. Yeah.
yeah, how would we come to know that from which API the problem has started?
Hmm. So you will be having these 100 APIs that would be hitting together, right?
Hmm.
You can, if you know this JavaScript or TypeScript or even this Python language, any of the programming language, you
Hmm.
can measure the time that has been taken in the network, right? And you can
Okay.
see how much time is it taking,
Okay.
right? So the response of the time, or else you can also capture start time and
Hmm.
end time for that individual API request. And then you
Okay.
can see how much time was taken.
It is through timestamp or something we
Yeah,
can
yeah,
do
you
that?
can use
Hmm.
timestamp as well. Wonderful. You can
Okay.
go for timestamp. For example, you're hitting it on some particular day, time, you can capture
Hmm.
that value. You can
Yeah.
also do reliable testing. Maybe
Hmm.
when you first tested it, your network or internet was not fine. Second
Hmm.
time, third time, you do 3 rounds of testing and then you take an average of that to have a
Okay.
proper solution,
Okay.
proper number statistics, right?
Okay.
So that's also one of the way, right?
Okay.
Okay, Chavi, I'm done with the interview. Do you have any questions for me?
Please give
Yeah,
me
let
feedback
me,
first.
let me stop the
Yeah.
recording.